Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap, as always, with some really interesting speakers today. But before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to access it on demand. We'll be sending out an email later on after the webinar that includes a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are going to be taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question, don't wait, don't hesitate. Use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And we'll take, I would say about 10 or 15 minutes near the end of the presentation and go through the audience questions. All right, with that, we will kick off today's webinar, which is the 7 Deadly Diseases of DevOps. Our speakers today are Anders Wallgren, who is CTO of Electric Cloud, and John Willis, Bachagalup himself, who is co-author of the DevOps Handbook. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. Looking forward to the conversation.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, John, I know you are going to kick off the conversation, so I'm going to put myself on mute and let you get to it.
Yeah, thank you, Charlene. Thanks, Andres, for doing this. Thanks, Electric Cloud. One of the things I left Docker. You're not going through my bio. If you want to find out who I am, just Google me. But I left Docker a little less than 2 years ago. For 10 years, I was doing I've been doing this stuff for almost 40 years now. A good part of it, what I call meta skills and transformation. But for about 10 years, I was working with startups and software companies like Chef, ultimately, and Stratius, and then Docker. And I left Docker a little less than 2 years ago, and I really wanted to go back to kind of non-product and really focus on, transformation. And over a year, I learned a couple of things that I thought like I'm an expert. I wrote the DevOps Handbook. I've been studying this thing. I know all the tricks, the value stream mapping and all this stuff. And when I started just going into companies and talking to people, there were these fundamental, and now cleverly calling them diseases, but kind of archetypes that organizations just seem to have, and we don't. If you look at the slide, I say, you can't lean, agile, safe, or DevOps your way out of, long-standing organizational habits, right? That kind of inertia. And I look at companies like I can walk in a bank in 5 minutes. I can tell you what they look like. I can tell you what their 40-year-old middleware looks like. I can tell you what their IBM mainframes look like. I can tell you what their, how they're trying to use Istio and Envoy with their new Kubernetes and container infrastructure. And I know the 8 or 10 patterns that they need to get to for what we call DevOps. What I learned over the first year, and now I've been practicing in the second year, is I don't know how to get you there because there's so much people and inertia, and I think that, it's, with the human capital interacts with technology, and in the end, what I think, I've myself have learned, as somebody who's an evangelist or, somebody who wants to help transform people, right? You have to be constantly learning. So in the last year, I've learned that if you can't uncover these diseases, then you can't scale. You can get an organization to get 3, 5, 8, 10, maybe even 15% to this kind of DevOps, objective. But then what really happens is how do you get the other 90% of the organization? And so Anders, I'm really happy to kind of share this discussion with you because we were talking about this and you got kind of excited when I mentioned this idea, and I think that's what sprung up this idea of doing a webinar. Right, Andres? Okay, good. I think I've lost Andres. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Okay, good. Anyway, all right. Anders, are you there? Are you having a difficulty? I can't hear you, Anders. All right. I'll just go on my own here.
Hey, John, this is Sam. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Anders. I'm trying to ping him. I think
All
maybe
right,
his
so
audio.
I'll just kind of move forward because we had, we had some great conversations about this. So just tell him to say hey when he pops in, because I know he had a lot to share on this. So anyway, so the first deadly disease basically is invisible work. And what I mean by this is when I go in and I have conversations, what I've been fortunate enough to do over the last year is actually work for a CIO, right? So go in at the CIO level, and one of the things I do is I walk in and I say, here's the deal. I don't dress up. I wear my sneakers, and I say, I'm going to tell you things that the big five have not been able to tell you for the last, for as many years as they've been in here, and I'll challenge them and I'll say that, and they can't tell you. And I'm pretty bold, and a lot of them are like, hey, this guy's full of it, get out of here. But some of them bite off on it, and when I come back to them,
you're not full of it, John. Don't worry.
I hope not, but we all are. But hey, we get
I'm back. I figured out my microphone problem. Sorry
no
about
worries. Yeah, I don't know if you heard. I was just talking about how we originally started talking about this idea, and
I could hear the whole time. That was the really frustrating part.
I knew something was going on. So.
Yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this too. I mean, I think I get the privilege of working with a lot of our customers and prospects, and really working on the initial, hey, what is our process? What's our desired end state? Where are we today? Those kinds of things. And so, I get to live this with our customers, and it's just a fascinating journey to go on them with it. So great, and very excited to talk to you about this today.
Yeah.
And now I'll let you keep talking.
No worries. Yeah. So the first deadly disease, so I was saying how I go into CIO and I challenge them, and some of them bite off on it, and then I go in and I meet, and I uncover a lot of them. We'll go through. We'll see how much time we have. I don't know how much we can go in every disease in detail. 1 in 7 are probably the most important, as you'll see, but they all kind of fold into each other. But one of the things the first thing I do very low tech. I spend like a couple of weeks meeting hundreds, 200, as many people I can squeeze in a couple of weeks. And then typically what I do is I start off with some development teams in isolation. And then, for maybe the first week, I meet 5 or 6 teams, try to get 4 or 5 hours, sometimes a whole day with them. And then the next week, I put the teams together and kind of cross-reference. And for those of you old enough, remember the Columbo, character. I'm like Columbo. And I'll give you a great example is, on average, so the first thing I do, I realized no high tech. No, we don't talk about DevOps. We don't talk about safe. We don't talk about Agile. It's just all low tech. In fact, one client couldn't provide smart boards, so we went to flip charts. Now I use flip charts all the time. And the first thing I do is I go up and in this kind of first deadly disease is I draw a box on a flip chart and I say, where does work start? And what's amazing is on average, I get arguments for about an hour on average, trying to tell me why that's not a good question. I'm like, yeah, and they're like, John, that's a difficult question to answer. I'm like, yeah, no, that's why I'm asking. Yeah, but you don't know.
Point.
There's many ways to answer that. I'm like, yeah, can we start with the first one? And it's just it actually sets the stage for kind of trust. You literally mentally wrestle. I'm like, okay. You get in on a Monday morning, you fire up your computer, there's something that you're going to do. Where did that work come from, right? And then finally, after a certain amount of time of just, kind of just being, in my mind, just being tenacious, and they say, okay, well, if you must know. And then what happens is I'm able to unravel where the work's coming from, because now I've earned their trust. We've actually had a kind of a verbal battle for an hour. And what I find on average is most companies, large companies, only capture, I would say average 50% of their work is even captured. So just to give you a sense, when I go back, I do all the kind of, I kind of categorize all the sins throughout these questions. Nobody knows that I'm asking them in these categories. I'm kind of aggregating that. And I go back to CIO, and the CIO is like, okay, John, how do we do? I'm like, not good. And like, okay, John, what do you mean by that? Good CIOs, like, they're not going to take platitudes, like, not good, right? Like, I'll say, well, okay, I'll give you at least one more platitude. If you built airplanes, I would not fly on them. And then they're like, okay, you have to explain that, Mr. Willis. And I'm like, well, you only capture 50% of all the work that goes on in IT. I mean, you can read all the books in the world. You can read the DevOps Handbook. You can basically, run Kanban boards all day long. You can do automation. You can do all this stuff. But if you're not seeing 50% of all the work that's going on in your organization, you're doing surgery in the dark. You're on the dark side of the moon. And from there, that sets the stage of, okay, again, I feel almost like I've been a charlatan in my DevOps. I hand people the DevOps Handbook and say, do these 10 things. And I don't even ask this fundamental question is how much, I don't ask the bosses. I don't ask the CIO. I don't ask the CIO's direct reports. I ask the edge. And I ask them why they make decisions and why didn't they think they had to make a ticket for that. Well, it's Bob. I know Bob. He's the greatest. I whatever he does, I just do it. He's never wrong. It turns out, Bob's work actually turns into 5 downstream dependencies. It takes a week. But for you thought Bob's work was only 5 minutes. Anyway, that first disease, I think, stems all the things down the road, like, how do I look for kind of notional Brents, the Phoenix Project, bottleneck Brent. Well, why do I even look if I can't even tell what kind of work, if I'm not capturing at least a high percentage, hopefully all of my work. I don't know, Anders, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I see a very similar thing when we're out with our customers. And I spent a little bit of time last year with one of our largest financial customers, and they had done an absolutely spectacular job in recording and capturing their processes, their workflows. Essentially their software pipelines for how the software gets written and goes out the door. And still, we spent a week together and discovered, all of the things that weren't actually already captured in those documents. And it was, and it was kind of time after time. And I say this with admiration for the fact that they got so far in terms of, prepping for our arrival. But still, there was a lot of discovery that had to happen there of, well, and then we do this. And somebody would pipe up and say, well, wait, before we actually do that, we have to do this other thing first. Otherwise and so there was lots of discovery there. And it kind of led me to, this is a very human thing. This is a very interrelational, kind of interpersonal thing that we're engaged in. And the communication and the visibility and the transparency is so very, very important. I did a small interview yesterday on value stream mapping. And one of the questions was, do you think artificial intelligence, machine learning can help with value stream mapping? And I have to admit, my first kind of initial impression was, hell no. AIs don't discover things. You have to tell them everything, right? You got to feed them all that. If you only give them 50% of the work that you're actually doing, it's not like they're going to go off and discover the other 50%. You got to go talk to Bob. You got to go talk to Cheryl. You got to go talk to people to find out how this actually gets done. So that you can capture that, and then what you do with it once you discover it is kind of what happens next. But yeah. It's 50% is probably you're probably doing pretty well. I did
that's terrible.
I saw the output of a value stream mapping exercise that somebody did, and I mentioned the percentage of kind of idle time to Gene Kim once, and I thought it was awful, and he's like, oh, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, right? Is people show me their value stream maps, and I say, okay, well, did you ask these questions? Have you? And they're like, oh my God, I've got the cart before the horse. I'm a big fan of value stream mapping. I think I'm trying to codify this, kind of a level 0 conversation and a level 1 conversation. A level 0 conversation are like these disease things. The other thing too is, as kind of DevOps evangelists or people who or consultants or people trying to move the ball in an organization for transformation, right? What we don't take into account is we just don't talk to the people. I had the opportunity to interview Christina Maslach, the former authority on burnout, at the DevOps Enterprise Summit last year. And, I went back, there's something that she said, which was related to just change in an organization from burnout, but totally relates to this topic. And she said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing her quote, but she said, whenever we're talking about any kind of change or improvement, you are counting on a bunch of human beings to change and make that happen. If they haven't been part of figuring out how to do it, the change efforts will be dead on arrival. And so so not only this uncovering, I call it kind of organizational forensics, right? Like we don't really have a name for this. These kind of rote social, technical, human, institutionalized behaviors. One is we need to at least go to the edge and find out what they are before we slap automated value streams or automated, CI/CDs, or we slap great monitors on systems. In your case, slapping AI systems, right? Like the answer is yes, yes, and yes. I mean, AI can do great things, but AI is not going to figure out things that just aren't uncovered. And I think that second point that I've kind of stolen from Christina or Dr. Maslach is this idea that you have to be part of that. You can't just walk in and say, hey, everybody, Monday, we're doing this DevOps thing, and you better learn it fast. Here's the handbook. But what doesn't matter, read the handbook. Yeah. Like you have to improve them. Let's go on to second deadly sin, which actually kind of is sort of a fabric for the first one. So the next slide, right? Yeah. So this management system toil. This is interesting because Gene has the Gene Kim, right? We not only a lot of us get the opportunity to get involved with DevOps Enterprise Summit that we run twice a year, but also one of the staging things that we do is a bunch of us go to Portland for 2 or 3 days, and we work on these kind of hard problems. And so the output of that sometimes becomes these manuals or books, right? And this is one that I didn't work directly on, but it was one that was an output of last year's, and it's called Overcoming Inefficiencies in Multiple Work Management Systems by IT Revolution Press. But here's the thing, right? The second thing I look for when I talk to people is I've already kind of captured where the work comes, how it flows, and then you start asking like, okay, where does it come from? And some of it is drive-by, right? Somebody looks over the cube, hey, Bill, can you get that done? Some of it's email, some of it's hallway, some of it's tickets, some of it's SharePoint, some of it's, right? And then what you find is, again, going back to CIO, say, hey, you got a problem because you got about 10 different work management systems just for creating ticketing and work, right? And they're like, no, we don't. We only have one. It's Remedy. Like, nah, you got about 10, buddy. Yeah. And what you find is they just don't know that there's all this inertia, and then people don't have the context. Some people putting things in SharePoint, but they're not really contextually describing work. Some people, for certain kind of changes, are creating, kind of change tickets and Remedy. Some people are actually already moving towards a development workflow and creating Jira tickets. But the bottom line is one of the reasons you're only capturing 50% of your work is you've created a battleground of tools that are just confusing the heck out of everybody. And one of the things that I thought was brilliant in that overcoming inefficiencies in multiple work management systems is they built kind of a countermeasure. So they described this problem and then create kind of a countermeasure metrics. And one is you just basically, kind of, all right, sorry, on Monday, everybody has to use Jira. But no, everything on like that doesn't work. But they have what they call kind of a strangulation. I'll just call it a ticketing strangler pattern, where what you start driving is you take all these disparate systems and you start driving them towards one system. Hopefully you're driving them towards something like a development methodology system, maybe Jira or whatever your weapon of choice is there. And then so here's the meta point here is, I can go in and tell you to do these 10 things, or I can start uncovering these kind of forensic level knowledge about how you work, and then I can come up with strategies that are more likely to drive you to the outcomes. Because if I can drive you to all systems that you use, strangle into a ticket system. By the way, TaskTop is actually a very reasonable tool that can be used for this, among others. But and then I can strangle you into kind of a ticketing, like a development methodology type ticketing system, and that helps me move you. And I'll get into some of the other sins in a minute. Helps you move to more of kind of a build run team structure, where the build run, or sometimes referred to as two pizza team. So what you see in here is these kind of diseases kind of funnel the way down into uncovering rote knowledge about how you look, and then how actually help start creating a true dotted lines, hopefully eventually solid lines to getting to those kind of principles and practices that we know that are well defined in our community as high performance.
Yeah, there's a couple of approaches that that we've seen, particularly with our customers, have kind of great effect. Kind of fighting the feeding the beast or feeding the multiple beasts in some cases. And I mean, to me, many ticketing systems are, and when I say ticketing systems, I don't necessarily mean sort of bug tracking systems and those kinds of things, but more service management type things, that they're just really expensive Post-it notes. And it's just another opportunity for miscommunication, another opportunity for delay, and those kinds of things. So two things that our customers have used very effectively is self-service approaches, so that if I need an environment set up, I don't file a ticket to ask for that and then wait until somebody gets around to doing it. I go to the self-service system and I pick from the menu of pre-approved, and I have the authentication and authority to do this, and I pick one of the pre-approved environment types, and I say what I want on there and all that kind of stuff, and then 5 minutes later I have my environment. In the meantime, in the background, the ticketing system has been updated, right? So we have an audit capture of who requested it, when did it happen, all of those kinds of things. But we turn it around a little bit so that it's not so much you file a ticket and then it happens. It's you ask for it to be done, it happens automatically, and the audit action kind of happens automatically. And really what you got to do is you got to hook up the ticketing system to your orchestration and vice versa.
But I think that's the point. You got to hook it up to everything, right? That's the whole. Because what happens, I don't know if we'll get through all 7 of the diseases, but if you're only capturing 50% of your work, and then people are throwing up systems that are uncaptured, and then they kind of lie, and then they kind of migrate their way into quasi-production systems, then you have no record of them. And then you can think of all the toil that comes from all these systems that are living in your big old system that have vulnerabilities, that people don't know where they are, they don't know who the service owners are, right? So in the model that you just described, request for service or self-service implementations are great, but if they stand alone and they don't all drive down to a singular ticketing system, that is your kind of, like, I know all work is captured, then whether it's a request for more storage, or it's a request for a prototype system, a POC that you're going to put up, or it's a bug or a new feature, like I have a record of all that work. So then all the other things that happen related to that, like how do you do monitoring? Who do you send alerts to when you have monitoring? Well, if you've got 30% of the systems that are running, I've talked to people that that run service catalogs, right, or CMDB, right, and I'll ask how accurate is it, right, as you start earning their trust, right, you get these numbers like 30-40% accuracy on their CMDB, and you scratch your head and say, well, what's the point, and then but then the answer is because the reason they're only 30 or 40% accurate is because you're only capturing about 50% of the work. So most of the things that are going on in your system are just never captured in any way. And so when you buy like millions of dollars worth of monitoring software or observability, I'm not making fun of it. I think observability is a good way to describe this, the problem domain of understanding what your organization looks like. But if you don't know where do you send the alerts? You say most organizations you go into and you have the conversation and you ask about monitoring alerts and where they all go to. Well, they go to the people who installed the alerting system or the monitoring system. Oh, really? What do they do with it? Oh, they send them directly to trash, right? Like, how come they don't go to the service owners? Well, oh, I know. You don't have an accurate service catalog. Oh, I know, because you don't have an accurate service catalog because you only capture 50% of your work.
Or they simply don't have accounts on those systems because that costs money. I mean, that's one answer I've heard in the past as well.
Yeah, but I mean, but then again, going back to like if we captured all work, right? That that would get arbitrated in a certain way, right? Like if you made it mandatory that all work on all systems has to be captured, then you have to arbitrate. Like we have no money. Like you have to arbitrate it. Like even open source, right? We tend to how much open source just floats through the system, and I love open source, but like that's that there's a beauty to open source and there's a cancer to open source, and the cancer is anybody can download any of this stuff and put it on our systems, put it in a test system. It becomes more reliable. It somehow moves from kind of a test and a kind of prototype system into kind of monitoring some quasi-production stuff. But anyway, let's move on to the third one. The third disease, and this is tribal knowledge, and this is kind of fun too, because in some ways you could say, well, if you read the Phoenix Project, this is Brent, but it's more about what I find is when I talk to CIOs, some of the questions I get is, okay, John, one other, after you go through a lot of things, like another question is, how do I get young talent to, I'm a financial institution in Boston. They've got some great universities here, but most of the kids either go to a startup or they go out to California, Silicon Valley to do a startup or some company out there, Facebook or Twitter. How do I capture those kids? And I said, well, we can talk about how do you capture those kids to stay. But you got a bigger problem is how do you keep them? Because when I interview, it's funny when I interview, like I said, I get to interview hundreds of people. And it's this interesting thing where you'll ask some question, well, how does that get done? And the people who have been there less than a year go, I don't know. I've been asking that since I've been here. And the people who've been there like 5 or 10 years, oh, that's easy. You go to Bob. And then young people, what do you mean you go to Bob? Well, Bob, he knows how to do it. Just go to Bob, right? And then if you ask some of them, I went to Bob. And you know what? I went to Bob and he said, just give me it. And then when the young person who decided to take a chance on this financial institution instead of going to Facebook or Google, they said, I've got a minor in finance. I'm going to stay here. And about the third time they go to Bob, and Bob says, hey, I'm too busy to explain it to you. Just give me the work and I'll do it for you. They're like, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm going to take that job with Google. Right? And so what you have to do is not only identify these kind of Bobs or Brents, also you have to identify, if you have multiple of them, if you're only capturing 50% of work, you don't know which one's doing valuable work or value add or non-value add work because you're only capturing 50%. But then you have to institutionalize. You have to actually institutionalize, breaking tribal knowledge into kind of institutional knowledge, right? And so, and here again, great example. I can go in as a CIO and say, you probably should get Slack. And they're like, why? Well, everybody uses Slack. Why? Well, it's a great collaboration tool. Okay, why? Well, it's got a really cool user interface. People like it. Or I can go in and say, well, you got like this Bob, this Brent, and this Sue, and I find that they're overwhelmed. They try to help. They create wikis, but nobody knows where the wikis are, so they're tired of creating wikis. And so here's why you need a tool like Slack. I think Slack is one of the better tools, and because now you can have people go into Bob's channel or Sue's channel, which is designed for people to ask questions to them. And in most cases, they can either type in the solution, right? And so that's just one small example of this. As you uncover the truth about an organization, it makes it much easier to suggest the roadmaps and the kind of trajectory of how to get to the things that we know you all should do.
Even with Slack, though, I've found that it's it's not a perfect solution to that, because one of the phenomenons I see happening there with our own use of Slack is that people will ask questions in one-to-one channels, right? And so that's to me the same as just walking in that person's office and having that conversation one-to-one. The rest of the org doesn't benefit from it because you didn't do it in a public channel or in a populated channel. No, so even with the tool, right, you got to figure out how to do it the right way.
No, you can't. You've got to constantly be iterating. Like another thing I do is, a lot of times what I do is I teach these organizations to kind of do this forensics themselves. I'll say, if you're doing this as a one and done, don't bother. Don't even, you're wasting your money, right? So you have to start implementing things and then go back and keep having these kind of edge-based, low-tech conversations. But ultimately, we've had clients that, where, that like you've created up Bob's channel. So there's now a channel for Bob, right? And people know that's a Bob channel and it's open for everybody, right? And Bob will only answer questions there, or Bob can have windows, right? And then, and I've got one customer that used Azure ML, the machine learning. It's a very cheap, easy to use, and it wasn't hard for them to put in, where they were able to start taking some of those repetitive questions and actually learning and answering them already. But then back to that, back to originally when you said, like, you can use AI, or you could actually kind of start getting the human element into the system in a much deeper way, and then the AI becomes really stronger. So you're right. It's back to anything. You don't just slap tools. You have to create kind of dotted line and solid line, dotted line turning into solid line, directional advice to do the things we know are right.
Yeah, and they have to be kind of living, continuing conversations and or documents. One of my pet peeves with wikis is they're often out of date. That's the way we did it 6 months ago or 18 months ago. But since we've changed, and maybe it's in a trivial way. Oh, we run with this argument now instead of that argument, or on this machine instead of that machine, or sometimes it's more fundamental. But oftentimes the old information is still there, and you go find it, assuming you can find it on the wiki, and it's out of date. So that's one of my pet peeves with that. Which So don't use the wiki at all. I think that's probably not what I'm saying, but
no. And in fact, that's the point. Is when I interview people, that you find is, there's a wiki out there. Like, where is it? Like, you hear about all these wikis when you interview like hundreds of people that maybe 3 people in each cluster know about, right? And the whole idea of like tying Slack with a person like Bob who knows this kind of stuff, then the wikis become effective because now it's kind of it's sort of a self-balancing system. But let's move on because it looks like we're chewing up a lot of time.
Yes,
let's
indeed.
quickly look at like a couple more, Deadly Sin 4, misalignment of incentives. So this one, this is our classic where we basically, we have different teams, they're siloed. And so here's the thing I found. When 2 years ago, when I came out of Docker, my weapon of choice was value stream mapping, and actually a very specific model that Damon Edwards had created, what he calls graphical storytelling, which is it's value stream mapping, sort of on steroids, if you will. He has this kind of black pen, red pen, blue pen, and he's presented on it, I presented on it. But it's a way for teams to actually kind of say black pen is the truth, red pen is kind of the constraints and bottlenecks, and blue pen is how to fix it. So you literally build these kind of streams on, I use flip charts now, but the thing is that I used to start there and realize that if I didn't capture those first kind of 3 deadly sins, I was missing so much. So it's almost like I have to get through the kind of these first 3 levels of understanding before we can actually have a conversation about a value stream. Because the truth of the matter is, one of the things that, again, I'm a big fan of value stream, and it uncovers a lot of information. But one of the things that you're doing right off the bat, the reason I actually start off with the way your organization is structured. So value streams don't, when we're trying to transform kind of a sort of kind of non-DevOps, if that's a term, company, what we do is we say, okay, well, we've got to build a value stream. We're doing value stream mapping, so I need you to pull people from different teams that deal with this value stream and get them together and actually start asking questions. And the problem is there's so much you lose in learning from that. Because what I actually want to do is start targeting the teams the way they're already structured and siloed. I think you're actually creating this first meet and greet in an artificial environment, putting a team together that really doesn't work together except for on the peripheral. And I think it's a brilliant tool, but I don't think it's the first tool that you use. And I think it's a great tool for breaking misalignment incentives. But my main point is, the first thing I want to do is I want to talk to all the people, or not all, but subset of people in the organization, the way they're structured right now, because I want to learn. I put them in the value stream map, and I got a little bit of infrastructure, and I got development in there. One of the things I'll never hear is, this is a classic one I hear, where the development team tells me, well, infrastructure always gives us half of whatever we ask for. Disk space, memory. I'm like, why? This is 2019. Why are we actually bartering on disk space and memory?
And then if that's the case, why aren't you asking for twice as much as you need? And why don't we
start? Well, that's the game, right? Well, the game is when you talk to development team, there's all this frustration about resource allocation and how they feel like they manage systems that bring in $1 billion worth of revenue, and they have an infrastructure group from their mind that are treating them like babies. And then when you get the infrastructure group in a meeting, I don't want the first time before I talk to them to all be in one room like a kumbaya. What I want to do is I want to talk to the development team and hear all their constraints. And then day Thursday, I talk to the infrastructure team, and I say, hey, do you think there's any resistance or constraints or tensions between the allocation of resources from some development teams? Oh, absolutely not, never. I'm like, really? Because sometimes I hear when they ask for certain resources, you give them half by default. Of course we do. They're idiots, right? Like, you're never going to hear that in a value stream mapping discussion, right? And that's just one of hundreds of examples of, one team saying it takes 1 hour, one team says it takes 8 hours. And then, and that's why I say in the second week, we put the teams together. I'm like, hey, I got to ask. You say it takes 1 hour. You say it takes hours. Help me understand this, right? So my main point is here, an incredible tool for misaligned sentence is value stream mapping. And, what I practice is graphical storytelling. But I think starting here is dangerous. I think it's about uncovering truth. And I don't think you get to the level of truth without getting through these kind of fundamental 7 sins. You want to just pop on real quick, because I think we're already jumping.
Yep.
Go.
Yeah, I was just going to say my favorite illustration of misaligned incentives is the old Dilbert strip where they talk about bug bounties, and the one engineer kind of creeps off into the back and says, "Ooh, I'm going to write myself a new minivan this afternoon because they're going to be bug bounties." So,
there you go.
Or my other favorite one, which is actually quite real, which is MBOs around ship dates. Because, of course, the ship date is the most important feature of a piece of software.
Well, that's the thing. Again, when you have these conversations, I can go tell you, well, I don't think MBOs work, or I think KPIs are kind of reaction or subjective measures of truth, right? I can go through that, or I can spend a couple of weeks with your people and have them explain to me how it doesn't work, right? But the fifth deadly sin, incongruent organizational design. This one's pretty easy, and again, I'm going a little fast now, but this is the one where you literally can start. This is where you start like looking at like Conway's law, and I'm not going to go through Conway's law now, but about how your kind of organizational design is actually is put you in a position to produce software and service in a way that you might not be desired. So now you have this opportunity as you're uncovering and finding how people really work together. Are there kind of matrix-like organizations? Are they really? Does management think they're not, but they really are matrix? And again, you only find that when you edge, and then you can start working your way into this kind of notional, like moving from I shape to T shape to E shape. And then ultimately, this is a great segue point for funneling the ideas of transitioning into kind of build run teams or two pizza teams. And so now we go all the way back to the deadly sin 1, where we're trying, or 2, where we're strangle patterning everything into kind of development methodology, JIRA tickets. And then here now we're actually helping you based on how you look from the way your people tell me how they look, not the way you tell me, CIO, or your executive team tells me. It's how the people who work in the edge tell me. Now I can help you actually architect how to get from kind of stranglehold pattern on your work manager systems into build run teams, so you can actually start moving in more of these patterns that are high performance.
Yeah, my I was going to say favorite example. I wouldn't say it's a favorite, but my best example of kind of incongruent organizational design, and it also dovetails with misalignment of incentives, was I once worked for a software company where for a period of time, the QA organization reported to the CFO. And mind you, this was back in the day before Sarbanes-Oxley, so you often recognized revenue the day you shipped product. So talk about screwy organizational design and having poor incentives when it comes to doing the right thing. That did not work well, and was
no, that's a great example of a Conway's, but it's even like I was telling you the other day, right? I've recently the Equifax congressional review came out, so that where they actually. And
I went and read that after you pointed it out.
Yeah, and we could have fun just going over that in a whole webinar by itself. But one of the things that is blatant example of Conway's law is the CISO reported to the chief legal officer, not the CIO. And at one point during the testimony in there, they asked the CISO, chief security officer, when you found out that private identifiable information, PII data, was basically compromised. How come you didn't notify the CIO? And she said, I just didn't think of it. And that, like, you could see the Conway's law, like the fact that she reported to the chief legal officer, she didn't feel like she was responsible had she worked for the CIO. And that's just an example. And one other last thing, I think also in incongruent organizational design, you can get where you start talking about kind of market-oriented. We talk about this in DevOps Handbook. And then even the discussion about how you do your architectural design of your software and services and microservices. I want to bang out the last two, because the last one's probably the most important of all. And we know we're coming up on the hour. So 6, managing complexity. I'm just going to say that, my weapon of choice here is improvement kata, mostly coming out of Toyota. And mostly coming out of Mike Rother's Toyota Kata book. Improvement kata is really just, if you think about all ways to think about complexity, the way I think, the kind of single way in my mind that you deal with complexity, whether that's blamelessness or it's how do you, deal with complex systems that have all emergent properties, is, and this is very simplistic because we're running out of time, but it's applying kind of meta skills of scientific thinking or scientific process. Best described by Deming through plan, do, check, act. But if you treat everything as kind of a plan, do, check, act, everything's an experiment, and that allows you to kind of uncouple blame. It allows you to kind of uncouple the fear of failure, embracing failure, and all that. And if you don't mind, Anders, just so I want to squeeze in 7, which is probably the one we don't want to go short on, and that's security and compliance theater. Now, the beauty of this process, what I'm loosely calling organizational forensic, is as you drive through it, the number 1 disease is not capturing work, and bookended by the number 7 disease, which is, by the end, I'm able to show the CIO that what they're doing in most cases, in fact, everyone I've done last year, that what they do for security, compliance, risk, GRC, governance, risk, compliance, is just flatten out theater. And this is the point where there's a 50-50 chance I'm not going to get any follow-on work. I'm going to get paid. I'm still CIO. But I'm about to tell you 2 things. You're going to get an invoice and you will pay me, but you may not want to hire me for any more work because you're going to be so mad. Oh, no, John, don't worry. And the next thing you know, they're furious mad. Because you literally have uncoupled, and this is the point of what I tell them, like, you can bring risk assessment teams in, and you can have all these teams do all these things. Just go talk to the edge for about 2 or 3 weeks, and you will find that what the edge thinks they're doing and what the CIO thinks he or she is attesting to internal auditors and then ultimately external auditors is so disconnected. I call it edge to audit, that it's it is mind-boggling. And I'll tell you the thing I hear everywhere I go, which is I always, when the CIO gets mad, I'm like, John, this is one I believe everything else you uncovered in this study is accurate. I know we got a lot of work to do, but this one I'm saying I can't accept this as truth. And I'm like, okay, do you want me to go to the quote wall, buddy? And like one of your executives told me that they don't tell auditors things they don't already know. I hear this everywhere I go, and in fact, I hear people defend this. Like, what's wrong with that? I'm like, what do you mean, what's wrong with that? This is a drop the mic moment. Should I have to say anything more about why your security and compliance is just theater?
Yep. No, I've heard words to that effect many a time. Myself, and and I've asked questions like, well, and what do the auditors think about that? Oh, well, they don't know.
We don't, like, I hear now a lot about we're waiting till next year to explain Kubernetes to auditors, or I'll tell people I don't create extra policy around security. People are involved in risk, right? We don't create extra policy because it creates more work for us with the auditors. I'm like, this is broken. Like, this is how you get to an Equifax. I wish, make me go back in time. If I could have gone in and done this type of assessment, again, it's a counterfactual. It's like I could fix things from like I'm sitting here and now I'm looking back, say, if I did this and this, but boy, I would have had fun sitting in as I read the congressional report from the Equifax and I say all these things that if I at least had the opportunity to talk to the edge and get that. Ultimately,
We should record like a mystery science theater 3000 where we just sit there and say snarky things during the testimony.
Well, I don't know about like we could do. I'm thinking about doing Equifax the musical. Going to Broadway. So you put anything in a musical these days. So anyway, that's kind of the it's a short. We tried to stream through it pretty quick. I'm going to be writing more about this, but showing more for our customers that are willing to expose their results, which not a lot really are willing to do, but the ones who do, I'll be presenting more on this and really explaining out a lot of examples. And the quote walls are the things that are just fabulous. So you just start writing down what people say and you just shake your head, like, oh my God, that's incredible that somebody, a lead developer of a software service that brings in $1 billion worth of revenue just said that, So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a kind of an innate, fundamental belief that you can sprinkle security on something at the end, and you can sprinkle performance, and you can, that all those things are just, they're like seasonings that you throw on the dish before you put it on the table. That's not how it works.
That's right, exactly.
And it seems like we should have learned that by now, but.
And my only metaphor is, I think we're just not asking the lower level, like, oh, why do you need to ask that? That seems redundant, or we've already been doing DevOps for 3 years. Why would we do this? It's funny. Most of the people I talk to are like, well, that sounds all good, John, but we're already 3 years on our journey. I'm like, yeah, but do you know these fundamental? It's like I don't want to know. And every once in a while, we'll get somebody who's been down a 2 or 3 year journey that says, you know what, we're going to take this challenge and we're going to try it. And then we find things that are just absolutely accelerate their kind of. What I find is companies that they've gotten that 10% or 15%, and it's been, what they've done is spectacular. But now they're just stuck at the next 85%. They can't scale. And my hypothesis, and I'm starting to get some good anecdotal evidence around this, is that unless you go deeper in your discovery process, and I'm calling 7 deadly diseases, that there is a brick wall somewhere that you won't be able to get over until you unravel some kind of institutionalized things that just can't be in a handbook. I mean, no handbook is going to describe the scenario of one team saying it takes 8 hours and the other team it takes 1 hour. And to put them in the same room and find out that there were all these weird downstream dependencies of certain scenarios in their organization where some 50-year-old middleware products actually had to be manually implemented for the automation pipeline to work, but nobody really knew that. Which then
it's a work in progress for the industry, clearly.
We learn and we just smart people like us, you guys, what you do over there is really helpful, and then what we do is the other thing we got to be able to do as quote unquote experts is to challenge ourselves, right? Like this was a little bit of egg in my face of that what I have been doing was kind of wrong. Here's the handbook. Let me help you get to these things that we know you have to do. And my hubris was, I'm an expert, follow me. What I wasn't doing is just stepping back and saying, there are these kind of archetype problems that go way deeper than any of us actually can describe because they're so unique to your environment. So anyway, yeah.
So let's do some Q&A. Do we have some questions?
Oh my gosh, we have so many questions, you guys. There's no way we're going to get through them all. So let's go ahead and just dive right on into them. The first question, let's see. Actually, John, I think there's a little bit of echo on your side here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's mine, but
somewhere somebody has an extra microphone on or something. But okay, so the first one, how do you ask firms to capture tribal knowledge, and where should it reside, and who validates and maintains it?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So that's the thing. So it's funny how as I was doing this work, right, it was an evolution for myself to come up with. And what I found is when we finally got to these kind of flip charts, a lot of what I'm trying to do is capture everything on the flip chart. So in a sense, it's not really value stream mapping, because one of the things I found is I don't want any prescription. So I don't tell people, there's people getting into a really heated conversation I don't want to say, hey, stop, you need to draw the box this way, right? So I learned I just don't interrupt. But I have somebody constantly drawing and capturing things. And one of the things I found is we'd start, and I'll just say this person's name. Hopefully they're not listening. There's no way you should be able to tell who it was or what company it was. But we found this, like every time this name came up, Lou. I said, wow, we keep hearing Lou. So I kept driving a circle. And then at the end of the first week, I actually went into a hotel room. One of these, I just took the room for a day, like on a Sunday, which was, one of the event rooms, like a meeting room. And I put all the I got a picture of this. I put all the flip charts on the wall, and I just started seeing all the circles of Lou. And I realized, oh my God, Lou is this connector, and it's this bottleneck, and it's like everything seemed to be, okay, you can't do that, and then you finish and say, oh, you go to Lou. And so again, it's that kind of rote, low tech, and like what I've learned now, I just start circling these bottlenecks, these kind of tribal things that are out there. And so that's how you start recognizing them. The antidote to that, basically kind of the way you institutionalize, the first thing you do is you use the theory of constraints very much. I mean, it's the story right out of the Phoenix Project, right? You define the constraint, you elevate the constraint, the 4 focusing steps, right? So you do that, and then you I think technology, things like Slack to kind of blast radius institutionalize. But first thing you have to do is you can't recognize tribal knowledge by looking from outside in. That's why, again, like my passion about this, most people, I'm having a hard time selling this, to be very honest, because they don't understand it. It's like, wait a minute, if it's not like, if it's not, CI/CD, what could it be? I don't get it. It isn't a CI/CD. Help me understand this, John. I'm sorry, there's no name for this. But the only way you uncover the true knowledge of where these things are, these pockets of tribal knowledge, and usually they're people, is you have to go talk to hundreds of people on the edge, low tech, trusting. Don't come in throwing handbooks at them and talking about safe and lean and agile, and you don't know the principles about, I stay away from that stuff as far as I can, just to get people to trust me and open up. Great question.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's more about facilitation than it is about, prescription.
I agree. Just getting the truth, right? That's really what it is.
All right, then. Next question. How well does this analysis work for large companies or departments with more than or over 80,000 employees?
Yeah, we've done. I've done ones that are like 30,000, and you take it at pieces. One of the things I sit down is the answer is it works well, but you have to be kind of surgical on. The thing is, usually I'm doing these in 3 or 4 week engagements. Most people don't even want to bite off on more 4 weeks. Now, what happens sometimes we've had repeat, like, okay, I love that, let's try it bigger. But usually I start with a 3-week engagement, and it's like I try to keep it to 5 or 6 teams, because to get that more than that, and it's usually about 150, 200 people. So we've done it with large organizations. We just have to be really surgical. Usually there's a champion in the company that wants to do this, and in part of the pre-plannings, we spend a lot of time trying to look at the kind of organizational design, and I get a feel for which teams would be best represent. If there's 40 different development teams, could we pick about 2 or 3 that actually would be a good representation of most of the organization, and certainly not the ones that are already on board. So again, it's your answer is right. It's harder with the larger organization, but you have to start somewhere. And most people aren't going to ask me to come in for a year, and I don't have the time to interview 80,000 people. I can't do one company. So what I do is I try to come in and bite off like 5 or 6 teams. And the other thing I try to do is I want to get in and out, because I'm really not building a large service organization. I want to basically teach you how to do it yourself and how to keep.
It becomes a train the trainer, or train the apostles kind of a thing.
I've got myself. I've got a couple of people that I'm trying to bring on board to be me, but like I don't ever see us being like an army of people that do this, because it just wouldn't work. You have to have that kind of personality and trust and horizontal knowledge. I mean, one thing I know what an IBM mainframe application looks like. I know what a TIBCO system looks like, and I know what a container with Istio and Envoy looks like running on Kubernetes. Right? So I earn a lot of trust in a lot of different ways, and it's hard to find people. I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything, but it's hard to find somebody who can gather that much trust with a horizontal audience that quick.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left to the top of the hour, and we have a great question here that I really want to try and get to before we close out today's webinar. So I want to go ahead and move on to that one. If much security is theater, how do edge folks contribute or recognize quote unquote real security to shape policy to avoid Equifax events? Security cuts productivity, but requires domain expertise. So you're not arguing to remove security. So what are you arguing?
Well, first off, I'm not arguing. I'm basically spouting truth that mostly the edge, when you talk to them, know that the processes that have in place are just theater. Example, you interview somebody who basically creates a change request, sends it to cab, and they tell me, somebody who does payroll, and they say, you know what, I'll put all my they're PDFs that are 3 and 4 years old. Nobody even looks at them. I put them in. It's a joke. I don't even change the dates. But if it's going to the cab and it's gonna and payroll's not gonna go out tonight, and I gotta wait for the cab, I know how to backdoor and put it in. You hear all these stories of people that either think it's baloney and they play the game. The other problem is that what you find is, and again, it's the people that tell you this, that most of the security that they see from a reporting all the way up from like where, we've got, all green here on our audit, is that it's just a subjective. It's not objective. They're not objective measuring. They're subjective measures. The cab is a proxy. It's a human to human. It's a subjective. I as a human tell you that this is what it's going to affect and change. You as a human review this or have a CAB board, advisory board that reviews this, and you accept human to human that that's going to be okay. And then you approve human to infrastructure to say, this is, we think this is safe to put in. We've approved it. Infrastructure looks at it or as part of the CAB and says human to human, right? It's a completely subjective implementation, as opposed to something that would be in the supply chain, that would be everything that happened, the control points. And the point is, and then, the thing about like there's the myth that it's security, it's secure or speed, is a myth. And we debunked that myth with DevOps, and it's the same rationale that you can have both. You can have speed and be more secure. That's what the DevSecOps movement is really all about. Working on a DevSecOps handbook due out later this year with James Wickett, Shannon Leitz, and Ernest Mueller. And so the myth, that is a myth that you can't have security and speed. That security is going to slow down developers. That is a myth. Just like it was a myth that you couldn't have speed and resilience. We've proven with DevOps that that's a myth, and it's the same myth in security. Okay.
All right. We have 1 minute left, and we have one really awesome question I want to close out with. So let's see. So we don't seem to do much to develop those Bobs and Brents you identified as holding the critical insights about how things work. This seems to be a common problem across the industry. So if you were to advise a young person who wanted to develop into a Bob or a Brent, or Betty, what company or role would you tell her or him to join or take?
Well, I mean, I think the first point is you don't want to be a Bob, Betty, or Brent, right? In the sense the way we think of it traditionally, right? That you are this enclave of tribal knowledge, right? That's everything that's been wrong about our industry for 50 years. Right?
Yeah, you don't want to be the information bottleneck.
Right. It's a constraint. You're young. You're trying to basically prove that you learn stuff, but you have to learn how to be this incredible collaborator, and it seems counterintuitive to as you grow your career, right? You get forced into a career where, like, especially if you're somebody who is showing up on like, wow, that person, that Sue is like really something else, and like you almost have to defeat yourself. You have to basically unravel or flatten your, like, oh, it wasn't me, it was the team. And that can work against you, but ultimately in the right organization, and if you're not in the right organization that doesn't recognize that as the skill, then you're in the wrong place. You know, the guy Steve Nelspito has said, you know, you either change your job or you change your job. So you want to be that person who is the enabler, who is the person who helps train, who basically spends the time to figure out how to help people. And in a lot of cases, in institutionalized companies, you might not get all the credit for all those things. But ultimately, in the right place in the right time, you will shine, because
I would very simply say just go work at a small startup, because there aren't going to be many people that are responsible for all the things that need to be done. You're going to know all of them and sit next to them.
Yeah.
And then when you go work in a larger company and you start to see the friction that the layers of organization add and so on, you'll see and youll realize that, you know, you'll recognize
just to be fair, I mean, not everybody, you know, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, right? But that's not an easy pill for everybody to swallow. Just go to a startup, right? A lot of people feel very comfortable going to large institutions, large bonus plans, large insurance plans. I mean, a lot of those things aren't really paying out for a lot of people. But the point is, you know, I think it's a little bit of us to say, you know, I mean, I think you're right. Startups teach you really well how to, like, you know, everybody has to pick up, you know, if the trash ain't getting put out at night, you know,
exactly,
and you're the last one in the building, you put the trash out. like that's how it works, you know. But I mean, if you are somebody who doesn't feel comfortable jumping down to, you know, a lot of people come to me for career advice, and the first question I ask is, what's your propensity for risk and tolerance for? And a lot of people, big name people we know in our industry, will tell me, I won't work for a company that is less than, say, this revenue. And so for young people who are going to have that kind of motivation to stay with a big organization, I'm just saying there's sort of it's sort of a catch-22, but you will wind up better in your career if you always point your true north towards the collaboration.
If you don't do it while you're young, it's probably going to be harder to do later on.
I don't disagree. I mean, again, I'm just being fair. You know, I'm like, absolutely. John Willis flag on and say, go do a startup. Come with me. I'm going to do another one. You know, but I'm just trying to be a little fair.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to stop now because we're already 3 minutes over. But I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions, and I apologize if we didn't get to your question, but know that the folks at Electric Cloud and John will be getting a copy of all the questions that came in.
Okay, so. Yeah, we'll take a shot at all those, yeah.
Great. So also want to thank everybody for joining me today, and just a reminder that today's event has been recorded, so you will be able to access it on demand if you didn't hear all of it, or if you just want to listen to it again. The webinar is also going to be on the DevOps.com website, so you can always check it out there. It'll be under the webinars/upcoming part of the website. And while you're there, check out our other webinars. We've got a ton of them. John and Anders, thank you both for taking the time and giving us such a great presentation. I appreciate it. I know the audience did as well. And everybody, this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day.